It is indeed a great pleasure to be here among people passionate for religious freedom with no disciplinary or any other kind of boundaries. And I have been impressed listening to the intervention we have heard yesterday and this morning, both in the plenary and in other sessions, about the richness and the possibility of contribution that religious groups, and of course religious freedom, can give to different societies. We have heard also again on this very important topic from Professor Durham just a few minutes ago. The difficulties are of course there. We should not deny them. But with difficulties, challenges and also opportunities come. In preparing these short remarks, I've been inspired by the first tweet. You know, Twitter, many of us use Twitter, and you have the possibility to fix one of your tweets up on the list of tweets. So one person that is probably known to many of us, Chris Sipel, has a very, I think, relevant and powerful sentence on his Twitter account. You can check later, and you can actually retweet it. The sentence that he has on his Twitter account is this: in a world where people die for their faith because others kill for their religion, only the best of faith will defeat the worst of religion. Only the best of faith will defeat the worst of religion. I have had this sentence bumping up and down in my mind since the first time I've read it. As lawyers, we are inclined to think that through the smart use of law and politics, we can deal with any kind of social trouble and reconciliation enterprise. But it is true that in many parts of the world, religion would be a fundamental ally. However, we should also not forget that there are dangers in the use and abuse of religion. What is there about religion that sometimes leads to violence? How can we understand and address the lethal combination, whether in religiously inspired violence, violence against religious persons, or violence among religious groups? These are all questions that we are called to face in our work as experts working in the field of interaction between religion and society. How, therefore, following the title of this session, can justice be a path to peace? If we have learned something from history, we know that you cannot have a lasting peace without justice, accountability, reconciliation, and an open society. Uprisings around the world demonstrate that nations cannot maintain lasting peace and prosperity whilst denying their citizens basic rights and justice. For many years, impunity for many national and international crimes was the norm. Many states have worked together to create an international system of justice that would break that norm. There is, of course, more work to be done, more people to be moved to believe that it's possible to contain violence and to create a more just society, more people to be held accountable for what they have done. We have been able to develop an international architecture of justice, and there are significant advances in international law. Efforts by some states in many parts of the world to reverse these gains are reprehensible and must be resisted. And we see that there are efforts to break the international system, both of human rights and both the international system for the architecture of international law. We have seen this with the ICC. We see this many times at the UN. We basically, I would say, that using the words of a very well-known public international law scholar, Marty Koskaniemi, we see a fragmentation of the system of international law. And I think we must resist that and we must oppose that. We see that also in our case, if you allow me, in the case of religious freedom. We see a fragmentation of the notion of religious freedom where we basically sometimes are not even able to agree to the minimal content of the right to be protected. I think this is bad, and the situation to a certain extent has worsened over the last few years because there are certain actors in the international arena that advance notion of religious freedom and human rights just to comply with their own internal political agenda. And this is bad for the international system of human rights and for the international architecture of justice. What we should do? We must make use of all the existing instruments at our disposal to help countries around the world to recover from conflicts, and to rebuild their system of rule of law in order to allow people to build peace through justice. One might think that this is impossible, that this would take ages, but we have in front of us concrete examples that this can be done. I can simply look at the history of my continent and of my state. What was the situation in Europe after the Second World War? What was the situation in Italy after the Second World War? Ruins, poverty, lack of institutional structure, and almost civil war in my country, with the country profoundly divided, almost on the verge of a civil war. The best of faith came together, both in Europe and in my country. Men with a deep belief in God and in a better future came together to create a system of rule of law and justice through which we have been able to secure peace for many years. This was not to be taken for granted. Europeans had killed each other for many years because of religion, because of politics, because of nationalism. Of course, now Europe has its own problems. But look at the situation of today in a proper historical perspective. And we should welcome the fact that today Europe also aims at protecting and promoting freedom of religion globally. This is one of the most important recent achievements, which is very important for all of us. The usual mantra has been for years, Europe doesn't do religion. Now European institutions explicitly protect and promote religious freedom globally. And what about justice? What about peace? Here too, we have recent important achievements. The European Union has in fact recently approved its policy framework on transitional justice. The European Union promotes a comprehensive long-term approach to transitional justice aimed at fighting impunity, providing reconciliation and redress to victims, fostering trust, strengthening the rule of law, and contributing to reconciliation and non-recurrence. The use of these tools and the approval of the new initiative witnesses that more and more institutions are realizing that peace does not come from nowhere, but from the creation of robust institutions and robust civil society where, of course, the protection of human rights and religious freedom is guaranteed. Democracy cannot exist without such institutions and without the fundamental contribution of religious groups. As we have seen in the dark years of Europe, and I would say also over the world, when faith and the best of faith comes together, we are able to fight very important fights and win those fights. How then can peace come through justice? Peace can come through justice, beginning to build those fundamental institutions that can help all of us around the world to have an involvement of civil society in the running and the creation of the state and in the protection of minimal rights. These are not things that are to be taken for granted, but are the first small, important steps that we can all take and achieve together. Thank you very much for your attention.